Good morning. Oh, it's okay. Good morning, good morning. Sorry if I sound tired. I got about 3 hours of sleep last night. No, I'm not saying that to be dramatic. So, today we're going to be looking for good quality data trades, but we also take some zero DT, if I could talk, zero DT stuff if we see a good trade available. But as of my post last night, I really don't want to be focusing on that with the streams anymore. I've been seeing a ton of people blowing their portfolios up, and I really just don't want to contribute to that anymore. Um, so I am going to be focusing a lot of the streams on trying to find data trades, and this is kind of what I usually do when I trade anyway. Sitting here watching SPY for, 7, 8 hours isn't usually how I trade. So if that's okay with everybody, we will be going over dated positions and seeing if there's any good opportunities. The last 2 quarters I've been absolutely killing it with a lot of these dated positions. I usually do very well with them, um, but now that I've been really focusing on the dated positions over the last 2 quarters, I've been noticing a massive increase in basically how much money I've been making every quarter. So that's the goal. I want to be able to help everybody, including myself, set up really quality positions, whether we take dated options or equity trades, perhaps both. So what you'll be seeing is a lot of me bouncing in between symbols right now, which will be a little chaotic. Now, what I'm doing is I'm on the weekly time frame, and on the weekly time frame, I'm looking for mean reversion. So kind of what you usually see me do with my day trading on like the 5 minute time frame. I'm now doing this on the daily or weekly time frame. Now, if I do see a good trade that I do think is available, then I will swap it from the weekly to the daily just to see if those are correlating. If they are correlating, then that will be creating a fairly decent opportunity. But this type of trading, while it still obviously takes skill, it's not something you have to overly focus on either, which is nice. These dated positions usually are about 2 to 3 months out. Bitcoin's a mess. Now, if I see setups that are going to be happening soon but aren't ready just yet, usually I will write that down. Like Carvana here. This is on the weekly time frame. You can see that we have the makings of kind of everything we're looking for. I'm surprised I actually have this labeled out. I haven't touched this chart in a very long time. Um, cool, that works. We're just gonna change this to that. Okay, so weekly time frame here. We basically have exactly everything we're looking for. We have the cup, we have the top of the cup, we have the bearish structure at the top of the cup, and we're starting to pull down and form the handle. Now, on the weekly time frame here, we don't have that entry just yet. Obviously, it's above that, but I'm very sure over the next, 1 or 2 weeks, we'll probably be seeing that lower Bollinger pushed on the weekly. So when I see this type of trade, I grab my notebook. My daughter's been watching Blue's Clues way too much because every time I say notebook now, I just want to say my handy dandy notebook. Oh gosh. So I'll write down Carvana. With a note next to it, potential setup soon. Basically making a shopping list. Okay, so let's continue. Now, the reason why I look at the weekly to begin with is because it does create that opportunity where if we do have the mean reversion outside of the weekly area, like ELF here, it usually creates pretty good moves. Now, I'm going to draw on this chart for a second just to kind of show you some of these moves and how they correlate with the daily time frame. So very likely on the weekly here, where we do have this mean reversion from the upper Bollinger to the middle Bollinger, that's very likely going from the upper Bollinger on the daily time frame to the lower Bollinger. Upper Bollinger down to the lower Bollinger on the weekly. And we are now back at the upper Bollinger. So this means this is going to be very, very likely a quality short. Now, before I head to the daily time frame, I'm going to make a couple notes. So, Elf Beauty. We see that the weekly middle Bollinger is at the 65.96. Okay, then we're going to go to the daily time frame. And exactly what I said. This went from upper Bollinger down to the lower Bollinger, upper Bollinger, way down to the lower Bollinger. Now our weekly time frame has the middle Bollinger at the 65.96. The daily time frame middle Bollinger is at the 77.78. So that means we want a contract between that 67.96 to the 77. And in this case, this would be a put. Okay, so on open, we will be looking at the put strikes again for about 2 months out and trying to identify a quality put for this. Okay, so there's one trade. And I will make a list on screen actually for these trades. Give me 1 second. Sorry, there's going to be a text popping up on the screen that's going to be really large just for a second. And we will shrink this list in a second. Something like that. Okay. And then let me get give me 1 second. I just need to get a bullet point up on here. And I'll post the strike once we actually have the market open. Okay, let's go to the next symbol. And we're going to basically keep doing this until, we keep identifying trades. And this is what I do with my long portfolio. This is what I do with my client portfolios. And this is how I usually beat the primary indexes. So I'm going to target full or First Solar as well. But the contracts are probably going to be very pricey, so I may not take them. Again, the goal is not to be spending a boatload on contracts here. Swap to the weekly. Oh, and you see how on the weekly it's not set up. So I actually need to go back to ELF because I had it on the daily time frame. So we're going to cross out First Solar, as that's not going to work out. And if anyone needs me to explain the process again, I'll be happy to do so. Let's see the pre-market on FXY. So that's down a little bit. Now, FXY, I do think there's a really, really good opportunity to be taking the 60 strike calls for September 18th. But I'm not going to write that down on the list because that does kind of fully depend on the yen being bought up. So there's a very good opportunity within GameStop here, which usually I don't trade meme stocks. I think I've made that very apparent. But it still meets the criteria of the conditions that we're looking for, which is an extension out of the, basically a standard deviation. So I do think there's actually a quality opportunity in here. So give me 1 second, I just want to write this down. And we'll look at the options when the market opens, which is in 32 seconds from now. Then 21. So both the daily and the weekly are correlating extremely well here. So we will be looking for basically a 20 to 21 strike call. Now I'm going to swap to my other list for a moment because I do need to look at a couple things. Okay, so my ACN positions are up an absolute boatload. So are my HIMS calls. So is my Johnson & Johnson call, or put anyway. We'll look at SPY while I'm looking over my positions. Now, what we're looking at for SPY here, and sorry for all the drawings, but we are within this very, very strong buying channel right now. And we did break above this, very important resistance range, where basically each time we hit that range, we generally have a very large pull down. We've finally broken above that. And so far we are in mean reversion territory as well, which means that we can be seeing a pull down. But there's not a lot of expansion between the bands right now, which means that even if we did pull down all the way to the lower Bollinger, we're only going to be getting about $2 of movement, which that's fine for day trading. So give me just a second. I also want to look up those ELF puts as well. So again, we're looking for a put between the 65 strike and the 77 strike, essentially for ELF. And I want it about 2 months out, so that's going to be that October 16th. So it'd basically be those 65 strike puts, which are currently about 272, so a little more pricey. Now I'm not going to take them just yet. I try not to take these dated contracts right at open. Sorry, I'm just going through some of my positions right now. Now, I have started adding some of the USO 90 puts for December. Which, surprisingly enough, are actually green. Okay, got those all set up. All right, let's look at those GME calls. Again, not a symbol I really enjoy trading, but if the opportunity is there, then I do want to take it. Yeah, so the 2020 strike calls on GME for October 8 or October 16th, excuse me, would be about 142 per, so 1.42. So I will be taking a couple of those today, later on. Now again, that has nothing to do with the meme aspect of it. That's just, if I do see the opportunity, I will take it. Alright, and let's continue back on the other list. Now again, this still is on mean reversion territory within the SPY. I do think that a short position could be fairly okay here. Our volatility is down very, very heavily. It's at the 89.69, so it's down significantly, which makes a lot of sense. We've basically been seeing a short squeeze over the last 4 sessions. We have the HIG up substantially. Now HIG did have a dividend. It was a 36-cent dividend if I remember off the top of my head, which means that it does take that 36 cents out of the top price. So the HIG is basically at that almost 79.90 range. So it is quite elevated. So let's go back to our other list. Good morning, Wonders. Yeah, I think our hem strike will definitely be hitting that 35 this week sometime. Now I want to go to the weekly time frame again. And we're going to keep hunting. Now, HIM's on the weekly time frame. We basically bought below that middle Bollinger. So that should be trying to head back up towards the upper Bollinger on the weekly, which is, you know, obviously very good for those positions. There's a massive head and shoulders on Quantum right now. Yeah, that gives me a lot of confidence in my Johnson & Johnson puts. So I did take puts basically right at that 7 or that 273. So missed it by $1 and, you know, almost $2, but basically got the top there, which means that we should see the expectation of pulling towards that lower Bollinger. Or not lower Bollinger, but the middle Bollinger. But those puts have been doing super well. Currently, mine are up 154%. And if there's any symbols anybody wants me to go over, I'll be happy to do so. These streams are gonna be far more relaxed now. Would have been a good opportunity there. I did short basically the top of this as well, Merck & Company. So I have the 125 strike puts. Very likely this is going to head back towards that middle Bollinger on the weekly time frame. Ooh, Microsoft. This is actually a really good short opportunity. Okay, so let me write this down, but very likely we're going to try to find some sort of Microsoft-based bear ETF. So middle Bollinger on the daily is at 604.37. The weekly middle Bollinger is at that essentially the same place, so 604.23. Or I said that backwards, 406.23. So basically we're looking for a 410 put, okay? Or something, you know, close to that if we can find a quality bear ETF. So I want to look at my phone really quick, pull up Microsoft. Let's see, options. Let's check October 16th. And what does the 410 puts look like? So they're $410 per, which again, that's a little more on the pricey side. Not exactly what I'm wanting to jump into. But there are some different ETFs here. So there's MSFL, which is a bull ETF. But that also means there's very likely not a lot of volume in the puts. But we can get those puts for next to nothing. Now the problem is that there isn't a strike for October. So let's check the MSFD, the bear ETF here. Alright, there is calls. Spreads are a little bad right now. Not a lot of volume on this. We'll look at MSFU. Okay, there's a little bit of quality within the options on this one. So for this, I'm thinking those 30 strike puts would do it. Because the middle Bollinger's at the 2678 on the weekly. On the daily, it's at that 2610. So that's kind of exactly what I'm looking for. Let's check the spread between that. So it's about 143 per for those puts. So we're actually going to engage on those. So give me 1 second. And I want to update our list here. So let me pull this up on the computer. MSFX. Let me look at MSFX2 really quick. But I just want to write these down really quick. So the 30 puts on MSFU. Let's see, MSFX. Nope, these ones don't have the October strike. So we'll be looking at MSFU then. And let me get the list updated really quick. Okay, these are going to be for October 17th. Or 16th, excuse me. I want to move that over to the side just a little bit so that the option price doesn't cancel out the pricing on the side. Okay, and then for ELF, we're looking at those 65Ps for 2.72. So I haven't bought any of these yet. I'm not in any rush to. I will be doing a buy a little bit later after basically I set my whole shopping list up. So I am going to add that to my watch list, the MSFU, so that we can continue to keep our eyes on that each and every trading session. The FXY calls are up quite a bit right now. We'll look at the next symbol in just a second. So what I'm doing here is that I'm making a new watch list for all these options. So basically, when I do go to buy them all, I don't have to sit here and dig through everything. So I'm adding that elf put, which is, again, the 65 strike for October. I forgot to write the GME call on the screen. Give me a second. I have to check what call it is too. I didn't write it down. I believe it was the 20 strike call. Yeah, the 20 strike call. Those are about 146 per. Will JOLTS data have any impact on today? Very likely not. I think the market's way too focused on kind of everything else right now. And let me finally add this Microsoft put to the list. We'll check Micron in just a minute. Okay, got that all set up. Let's head on to the next symbol. So Micron, I know semis have kind of been in, dog water territory right now. But nothing I really want to engage on yet. It's very likely it's going to be heading down the 650 unless, the market's totally shifting to bullish. It could be. Um, just generally during these next couple of months, we usually see a bearish shift over everything. So we'll see if that continues or not. Hmm. We'll look up at these next calls and see what they're priced at. They should be fairly cheap. I'm just going to write that down. I don't want to engage on this one just yet. The daily and the weekly time frame aren't correlating on that is the reason why I'm not engaging on that symbol. Now, we could say, open is potentially a good target here, but the price action has just been essentially in a straight downtrend. I don't really want to chase that dragon. Always miss Arcat. There was a good opportunity at that 650. Santiscus fell quite a bit. SPY pushing pretty high here. Now, SSTK, I've traded this quite a bit in the past, but it does not have options to it. Not really long range or, long hold territory right now either. No, I don't want to buy Tesla. Those TSLL calls could do nice. Daily and weekly aren't really showing that confluence though that I want to see. Let's get through the treasuries. Now this symbol is there's a couple different ones that do this exact same thing. It's basically a short-term treasury bill ETF, so it'll just continue going up. This is the weekly time frame, so it's just going to continue growing day over day, week over week. Nice head and shoulders on WTI. Western Union. It's been a while since I bought into that. But it is still at a really good price here. So I'm going to look at the options here, but I'll probably taking some shares into that as well. So they don't have October, but they do have November. The 7 strike calls are basically $50, gives you 108 days out. I think that could be pretty okay. They just want it run super, super hard. But the volume on those calls are very, very high. Not the volume today, but how many have been opened. There's a boatload of calls stacked up on that expiry. So I think we're going to watch this thought. What's the delta? Yeah, it would be worth more just to buy the 7 strike. Okay, so I'm going to write that on the list. Sorry, just looking at chat now. I have one 763 put. It is up 28%. Do I sell it? We'll take a look at the SPY chart in just a second. Let me go ahead and get this option watch listed really quick. This is for November 26th, or 20th, excuse me. And it would be about 0.50. Okay, let me go ahead and look at the SPY here. Daily time frame have pushed into the upper Bollinger, which means that tomorrow we very, very likely should be expecting a higher high. Now again, this is kind of what you're looking for if you're shorting right now. You're really looking for the price to pull down towards that 161. Give me just a couple seconds because there's a ton of different screens that I'm jumping through right now. Also want to add to my Ledios puts here. So let me go ahead and pull this up on the screen. Not the most prime position because on the weekly it does show that we can head up a little bit. But I do really like those 100 strike puts. There's also room in the 110 strike puts as well because those are fairly cheap at this point. About 138 per. So we're gonna write that down, even though it's not the most optimal position, but it is a position I want to take. Honestly, for the SPY, I wouldn't want to fight this right now. When we push into the upper Bollinger like we are on the daily time frame, it creates this condition, which doesn't always happen, but it does happen quite a bit, where the next day we expect a higher high. So with that said, that means that very likely, we're at 764 right now. We could be seeing all the way to like 768 potentially out of tomorrow. Okay, these are about 38. This is for October 18th. Okay, let me head into the next one. And let me take a look at SPY really quick too. So we are seeing volatility rise slightly, but not very much. It's at the 90.05. Let's check our 15-minute, 30-minute time frame. It is pushed well above pretty much all the time frames. Not the 4-hour though. 4-hour is not showing that push. But it is pushed above the hourly. It is pushed above the daily, not above the weekly. So I do think it's pretty reasonable that it would pull back towards this 761. Especially with this morning, it's been basically sitting in the upper Bollinger the entirety of the day. So I actually want to look at the put options now that it has been running a little bit. These 761 puts are about $42 per. That's probably what I would try to take, is that 761 put. You can probably sit on that for the majority of the day. It is fairly cheap, but if you do get that push downward, then it would pay out very well. And the overall cost is, again, super cheap, so it's not like you're going to be losing a whole ton. So we're going to actually take one of these, and we will cut back to that in a couple minutes here. So let me watch the SPY on my phone. The MACD on the hourly is actually showing that it could push up quite a bit further too. But the 4-hour MACD is actually showing that it very likely is getting ready to pull down a little bit. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, so we got that set up. Let's go back to one of our watch lists and we'll continue looking for some dated trades. Let's see, where were we? We were at Western Union. Let me go ahead and turn off the drawings. I know I wanted to buy Zillow a couple weeks ago. Missed that opportunity. Okay, let's go to one of our next watch lists. This is one of those other ETFs, like I talked about. Basically only just goes up. Let's look at Berkshire here. We did miss the super short at the very, very top. Not gonna engage on that. Let's see, Chipotle might be a good short here. We are off the top by, roughly $2. Let's look at the options on... They don't have October options. Yeah, I don't like those options. So, off to the next one. After we go through these watch lists, I'll hop back to the SPY and focus on that. So I want to look at the options here. Those are insanely expensive. Even though those could pay out very nicely. But I just really don't feel like spending 1400 on puts right now. So we'll skip that. FICO, that could be a really good trade, but I'm not going to engage on it. That could be a nice long-term position to slowly start adding into though. Weekly showing that it isn't ready yet. SPY is at the 765 basically right now. I almost had short positions during that push to the 80. That would have been really nice. Would have been a whole $30 move. I remember people telling me that MicroStrategy wouldn't dump like it is, but it is getting absolutely destroyed. PayPal potentially is a good short in here. Daily time frame doesn't agree with this just yet. So we're gonna write this down to check later. By later, that's very likely in a couple days. What's this? Quad graphics. Seeing that same confluence between the weekly and the daily time frame. So let's look at the options here. Not a whole lot of volume on these options though. So while they could be good, because of the lack of volume, makes it not such a quality trade. So unfortunately, we will have to skip that one. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to check the chat yet. This thing is a machine. Okay. Let's see what the dividends are like. So it gives a monthly dividend, 18 cents a share, which isn't the best, but not the worst, especially when it has the growth behind it. Smaller market cap though. SPY finally pulling down just a little bit. Let's see, Texas Roadhouse. Actually, I have some shares in this, funny enough. But let's look at the options here and see if the options are any good. There's some volume within the puts. They're a bit pricey though, so I think we will pass on that. Let's take a look at XGN. Not a whole lot of volume on these. Yeah, so we're gonna pass on that. Alright, and let's go back to the SPY. And now we can cover the SPY for a little bit. So basically for our exit, we are looking for that 762. Yeah, I entered puts on SPY not too long ago, so think it's a reasonable entry at this point. Now, I do want to look over entering some of these trades, especially Elf. I think that Elf put could do extremely well. All right, so give me just a moment here. Yeah, and that 770 would make a lot of sense too, because ignoring all the drawings for a moment, when we do push the upper Bollinger on the daily time frame, usually we get a day 2 higher high. Not all the time, but usually that will be the case. So what's the higher high from the 765? Could be that 767, 770, somewhere around there. So that would make a lot of sense. Okay, at this point we're just waiting. I am starting to enter some of these other positions. So if you hear me kind of silent, that's basically what I'm doing. But I do have the 761 puts on SPY right now. Or 762, something like that. Let me look. 761. So I'm just waiting for some of these orders to fill. Now for all these positions that I have on the screen, make sure you do not put in as a market buy. Okay, you never want to do that. You always want to set it as a limit order. If you put a market buy on any of these, you can end up paying, 100% more than what the contract's worth. Um, so always limit order. Now, if we can get to this 762.43, I do encourage cutting a majority of the puts. Um, as again, I do think there's a very, very, very high likelihood that we just continue pushing for the majority of the day. So make sure you use that opportunity. Should I keep my Yoso puts 85 call or 85 strike for September 18th? Um, I think it's reasonable to cut those at this point and just focus on December because the December strike really isn't that expensive. Um, and those have been gaining pretty large premium compared to September where we only have essentially a little less than a month and a half to land that strike. So, this way you'd have almost 4 months to land that strike instead. So I did get a fill on the MSFU put for 125. So let me go ahead and change this. We got the GME call for 142. And we're just waiting on SPY to probably not sell off for the rest of the day. There was this head and shoulders forming on the 1 minute time frame, and it pretty much fully rejected. So be super careful with heavily shorting this. Yeah, that's all I could say about that. I do have some shorts on it, but I'm really not expecting a whole lot out of the day in terms of the short positions. Now, I'm not cutting my puts or anything just yet. Again, I didn't spend a whole ton on them. So either they're going to run very hard or I'll cut them in a little bit. Now we can push all the way back up to the upper Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame. That'd be the 766, almost 767. On the 1 minute time frame, we did have a pretty large candle up to that 765.72. We are back at the upper Bollinger on the 1 minute time frame, which generally means that from the upper Bollinger, we usually see price action down to the 20 slash lower Bollinger. So that's what we're kind of expecting at this point. Have to continue to move our target upward, as again the 20 is going to be pulling up with this price moving upward. Sorry I'm not talking a lot today. I'm super tired. Only had about 3 hours of sleep last night. Let's go ahead, excuse me, check our volatility. I'll go ahead and toss the call wall and put wall up. That'll probably give us a better understanding of what's going on. So we do have the call wall at the 765. Which sets a little bit foreboding for the upside. So let me get this labeled 1 second. Then our put wall is at the 758, so way, way, way down there. So this is telling me that very likely they will push up, but try to close it underneath this range slightly. But I don't think we get some massive push down to the put wall today. I think that's kind of out of the scope of what's going to occur right now. I haven't checked the max pain, but since we are pushing basically all-time highs, the max pain's going to be far below us, so I'm not too concerned about that right this moment. Let's check our volatility. Excuse me, not trying to yawn in everybody's ears. Volatility has been pulling down, of course, makes a lot of sense. We're seeing price action to the upside. So it's at 89.51. And we'll very likely be seeing similar out of the HIG. The HIG is at the 79.52. It was at the 79.40 something today. So it has pulled up, substantially. This is very indicative of, a continued push to the upside. We do see that it did sell down a little bit. It's climbing back up again. The high was at the 79.54. So that is, not aligning with what we're seeing on the SPY right now. I would say that the HIG hit the high basically in this range, and that currently we're above that. So potentially we can be getting ready to have that mean reversion type trade where we are above that call wall. Dealers are selling very high V contracts, but the gamma is still very high. There's still a lot of upside buying currently, so they will be selling into this as long as they can. That could be the entire session. Far too soon to say. But we should see some sort of move to the downside, even if it's not the largest. We should definitely see the 763-ish range pushed, potentially even the 762. Now, this is a really good opportunity to be taking those dated SQQQ 50 strike calls. So I'm going to add that to the screen. And these are for September 18th. And those are, what, 125 per? I think those ones are super, super good. Again, when you see the market push into the upper Bollinger, that's usually when you start to short. When you see the market push into the lower Bollinger, that's usually when you start to go long. Market has gone all the way from the lower Bollinger up to the upper Bollinger, you know, which obviously that creates that really quality short position. Um, this essentially has been a what, $41 move to the upside over the last 4 sessions. So something to definitely consider. They might be down, but it doesn't mean it's a bad position. It's kind of like my FXY calls that I had down for literally months. They were down like 70% for months and months and months. Well, they're now green, and they're not just green, they're massively green. Um, they're up over 50% right now. So just because the position is down, we do have a lot of time. If you don't have the money to DCA the position, that's okay. You don't have a choice, obviously, but it doesn't mean you cut it just because it's, low right now. Um, Especially when we are in the upper Bollinger, this is kind of that range where you do take those positions. This is not the time to be cut in that position. I think that's a mistake which, I've personally made in the past too. Is that when we get a massive push against our contract, we'll feel the necessity to cut the position at that point. It's like that might have been the time where you actually start adding to that position. So why would you want to cut it at that point? Just because, yes, you're down, but it doesn't mean it's the bad opportunity, it's a bad opportunity overall. Time in hands. I haven't heard that one in a long time. It's just more so that's how the algorithms trade. So I don't have a lot of fear in terms of holding those type of positions. So we're not seeing any shifts just yet. Dealers are just continuing to sell into the gamma. Call wall's still at the 765. And we just have to be patient at this point. So I'm still waiting on the elf puts. I'm still waiting on the Western Union calls. See, that's fair. Yeah, I know that trade I did really good on, but we definitely could have played it a lot better. Um, because it's like I had some super dated 130 calls that I let go for basically pennies compared to what they would have been worth. I mean, sure, I made a few hundred from them, but those contracts would have been worth like 4,500, 5,500, something like that per. So definitely did not play that one as good as I could have. But I did really well with the 150 calls. Those ran really hard. But that's kind of the same opinion that I hold on trades is that unless the trade's being fully invalidated, not just within the price action, but within the actual sentiment as well, um, then you just kind of continue holding on unless, there's a massive leg upward or downward and, it really shifts your thesis. But if your thesis is still sound, if the price action is moving in that direction, maybe not in the exact time frame you want, but as long as it's heading there, then it's very likely that strike's going to hit. As long as you properly price those strikes out, which usually the strikes that I price out are very, very quality. Usually they hit pretty well. It's like the list on the screen right now. I'm pretty confident about each and every one of those positions. Now we are pushing up, but it is going very slow. It is tapering in terms of how active the buyers are. Once the buyers do start dropping off, then we can expect that push to the downside. Basically, that's what the dealers are doing right now. They're selling calls very, very heavily into this range. And once those calls stop buying out, once the IV starts dropping on those calls, then dealers are going to start targeting the downside a little bit to close some of those positions, reset up, rinse, repeat. Now, this could be one of those days where they just push way above the call wall and try to burn people that way. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but in terms of dealers selling contracts, there's a couple ways that you can burn people at this call wall. Either you sell above the call wall and then pull down very hard to basically invalidate all those calls, or you start chopping very heavily and then do a large push upward because that means that a lot of people are basically selling those calls at that point, and it kind of acts in the same way. With how crazy Well, a couple things about that Micron call. Okay. Um, One, it's heavily out of the money. So even if you open tomorrow with the price being up, it could be worth less than it is right now. Okay, just because it is out of the money. Secondly, is that with the earnings, even though we do expect SanDisk to do well, I think that's pretty obvious. We expect a lot of these companies to do well right now. There's the potential that they increase their CapEx spending. Now, the investor sentiment on CapEx spending has heavily shifted from that being extremely positive, that people want to buy into that, to okay, we need to start selling our positions. Um, so those are two factors you have to factor into that. I think personally, what I would be doing is trying to take the profit today because you don't know what tomorrow brings. Um, Between that CapEx potential increase and the potential that maybe they do have a miss, um, that absolutely nuke that contract, you know? So just something to be aware of. Did I check Amazon? I think I did, but let me just double check. It's not ready just yet. It's almost ready. We'll write a note to keep watch for that, but um, not ready just yet. Very, very close though. No, I'm not really worried about my puts that I have going on today for SPY. Again, I took a pretty small position. Um, I don't really expect a whole lot out of them right now. It would be nice if we get a little bit of a selling downside though. But again, my focus on these streams now is basically going to be for, the long dated positions. Let me say bye to my daughter really quick and then I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see what's going on. Just the SPY squeezing still. No worries. Volatility is pushing, it looks like a new low of the day. It's at the 89.25. Or it did get to the 88.65, excuse me, I was misreading that. So, volatility, not exactly at the lowest portion of the day, but still pretty low. The HIG is still sitting at that 79.52. So nothing crazy exciting just yet. There's 767. Today would have been really great buying calls at the open. Um, but again, did not focus on that at the open. It's okay, because today would have been kind of a wonky day in terms of holding those calls regardless. Um, we would have seen the call wall, which I'm not sure if it opened at that 165. It might have. It might have been lower. It might have been around that 163 or something. I'm not sure. I didn't check the camera right at open. But I'm sure there's many opportunities we would have gotten shaken out of those calls. So, especially like this little bit of selling right here. Um, this would have been pretty questionable to hold calls into, especially if you were holding for the morning. You start seeing it taper away from that upper Bollinger, which looks like that it could start selling off. Um, Now again, we weren't really paying attention to the SPY at that point. So we might have seen the volatility being lower, something like that, where we might have held those calls. But overall, I'm not too worried about it. I know everyone kind of likes to watch the 0DT trading, but I have so much going on in life now that it's really hard for me to sit here and 0DT trade, and I really don't need to. Um, it's kind of like I mentioned in the Discord yesterday. It's like I made thousands of dollars just by laying in bed having a migraine. Um, because, I have really nice dated positions, so I'm not trying to brag about that or anything. That's not the point of me saying that, but I don't really build my portfolio on 0DTs, even though my largest win was from a 0DT trade on the SPY. That's not really how the portfolio gets built. Let me check the gamma. Yep, still at that 765, so the same thesis still holds true for me, is that we should be expecting a push below that level, unless dealers are basically trying to squeeze people above that range. They both can work in somewhat similar ways, but does make it a little easier when they do push below the call wall. Because currently we are basically in open waters right here, right? This is range where we don't have any supports to really rely on. We don't have any resistances to rely on. Um, all we have is if the market's actually buying or selling at this point. Our nearest levels of support would be targeting these gamma levels. Yeah, that's what I agree with, Jen, is that, you know, most people really shouldn't even be 0DT trading. If you can't sit here basically locked into watching the screen and watching all the indicators and watching all the different things that can be occurring during your trading day for a whole 7, you know, hours roughly, then there's really not a whole lot of point to do or to base your entire trading career on 0DTs. Um, you're eventually going to get burned on it. And many do. Most do. Me, I know I'm a very good trader. I've been doing this for, almost a decade and teaching for almost a decade and everything too. And there's plenty of days where 0DTs will get me. You're not going to win every single 0DT trade. So it's like for me, I take small positions. If those don't work out, it's not the end of the world. If they do work out, then great. That just pads the portfolio a little bit. Yeah, everything's on the screen that I've taken. I did buy into some W or I don't know why I want to say WU Western Union shares. They're super cheap and the potential for them to move upward is quite nice. I bought 2,000 shares. Nothing super large, but it should pay off a few thousand. And I think SQQQ shares as well could be pretty good at this point. Again, we might be seeing all-time highs right now. This could be a blow off top. We don't really know. Obviously we can't read the future. Some of us say we have crystal balls, but we really don't. Think that's pretty clear. But we do know that on average, literally almost every single year that I've been trading during the months of August through October, we usually see some pretty heavy selling. Um, which means that, a lot of these dated uh, put positions, a lot of these dated short positions should do pretty well. Um, we are at the upper Bollinger on the SPY, probably at the upper Bollinger on QQQ in terms of the daily time frame. Then, that's telling us that very likely we should be seeing some selling. I won't say fairly soon, but within the next couple months. Basically me just saying that it's a really good time to accumulate some of those longer dated positions. Like today I've purchased 20 of those SQQQ 50 calls, or yeah, the 50 strike calls for September 18th. I think they're going to be very nice. They're super cheap right now. The SQQQ 50 strike calls for September 18th. Um, on the screen it says 125 per, but they're actually about 117 per. So, you spend basically roughly $120, um, get a position that's going to last you a month and a half compared to taking zero DTEs where you might be spending 60 to 120 something dollars for a couple positions. Maybe have them work, maybe not. It should still be a quality opportunity tomorrow. Again, I do expect a higher high out of tomorrow's session. Yeah, I wouldn't continue adding 0DT puts into this. That's why I just took a pretty small position. But I do like dated puts. I think dated puts are, extremely quality. That's basically what SQQQ is. It's the short ETF of QQQ. Yeah, I think dated puts are going to pay out immensely. Most of these long dated positions usually do pay out, which is why I like them. I like having that time. I like being able to not have to stress out during the trading session. I usually try to get about 2 to 3 months out. Um, I know these SQQQ calls are about a month and a half. You could get further than that. I might actually do that. Um, but I do like the September 18th expiry quite a bit. But usually at the very, very minimum, I try to get about a month out. Usually at the maximum, about 3 months out. If I think the position is really, really good and I want to really capitalize on, some long-term growth, then I'll take a leap. But usually those are leap calls. So that's something where like I would grab it on TLT, like a treasury-based position. Um, if we have a major tech company drop, significantly, then that becomes a really good opportunity to take one of those leap positions. Usually pretty expensive because you're paying for a lot of time, not just paying the equity value or anything else for the delta. You're paying a ton for that time duration, but sometimes they could be worth it. Sorry, Perry Dream. I just saw you type in chat. Have to scroll up, unfortunately. Till I have my office completely set up. I'm only have one screen right now. But hopefully that helped me explaining with the Micron. With it being such a short duration, you just have to be really cautious. Can it pay out? Absolutely. But I think the likelihood of it pushing up that high is very, very hard at this point. And each day we get closer to that expiration, makes that contract worth significantly less. So at this point, with the 20 MA pulling up above that call wall, I'm actually expecting a push down to the lower Bollinger. And that would make a lot of sense. A push from the lower Bollinger creates the ability for them to head out of that range as well. That would basically knock out a big chunk of the calls. We do see this accumulation range in here, which that's really what that selling's trying to do, is accumulate calls, knock people out of those positions, essentially knock out a majority of the retail out of those positions right there. So we see a heavy accumulation within the ADL right there. So I do think they will try to, may not be the lower Bollinger right at that point, but they very likely are going to try to push down below this call wall at some point today. Doesn't mean go hog wild shorting this. That's not what I'm saying. Um, but I do think there's a good thesis here of why we should be seeing a little bit of selling before seeing, massive continued buying. Now, they could be trying to do that accumulation in this range. Okay, kind of the same thing that they did back here. If that becomes the case, then they don't need to have this downward push. They could just essentially continue that push to the upside. So that's why I'm saying don't go crazy shorting this. If you take a couple cheap short positions, great. Hopefully we're all gonna see those pay out. But I also think that there's a massive likelihood that they can continue pushing this upward. And there's been no shift in the gamma wall at all just yet. So that 100 or that 765 is still very much on target. But basically that's what I want these streams to kind of be about at this point, is that we're going to be going over these dated positions. When we open new dated positions, each and every session we'll just kind of watch over what's going on, if our thesis is still correct, if our, entry was correct, if we're still expecting the same strike to hit, all those different things. And from there, everybody should be making money. I hope that works out for you, Joseph. I do think that the downside thesis at this point is very valid. We just have to be really, really cautious here, okay? Because can we see this push to 770 today? I think there's probably a 60% chance that that's going to happen. That's a very, very high odds for me to give. Um, just based off of the volatility, the HIG, the overall buying everywhere else. I think that, we absolutely can continue pushing up to the upside. But with the gamma wall being at that 765, I also see a lot of reason to have that downward push as well. Oh, I've been loving my IBM shares. Um, Again, my average on those are 219. Uh, I have, 200 shares. Super, super happy about that. IBX, I bought 1,000 shares, and my average on those are 14.93. Currently, it's up at 17.12. I know some people were telling me that IBM was going to going to go to below 100. And it's like, no, no, IBM's not. IBM's a good company. Always really like buying the dip on great companies. Yep, Tesla's doing okay right now. I just don't want to get mixed up with Tesla and SpaceX right now because I do think that there's a lot, a very, very large coordinated effort um, to actually short those very heavily. So I don't want to really be on either end of that right now. Is it a good idea to take the SQQQ 40 strike call for September 18th? You can take that. Um, Personally, I would still rather focus on the strikes that are a little more out of the money. I haven't checked the price on the 40 strike calls, but I'm sure you could probably buy like 3 or 4 of the 50 strike calls for that same price. And you'll actually get more movement out of those, um, additional calls for that same price as well. Something bought or sold. Oh, it's the elf call or the elf put. Cool. Got that at 271. So let's edit that. I mean, 12% still 12%. That's, you know, nothing to feel bad about or anything else. So I'm engaging some of the 764 puts here. Again, I think the likelihood of them paying off is very low right now. Um, Even though we do have that gamma wall at the 765. But dealers are really pushing above it right now. Now, when you add any of these dated trades, um, make sure that you add the contract to your watch list so that you can actively watch it instead of just having to look at the dollar amounts inside your portfolio. And make sure you add the symbol to a specific watch list as well so that you can very quickly kind of go between all the different options and symbols. So I basically have a watch list with all my current positions going. So for example, now that Elf Beauty bought, I need to add this to my current watch list, along with the contract that I have. Our HIMS calls are doing super well. J&J puts doing super well. Our Merck & Co. puts are almost at that strike. Now I should be adding to the list FXY. I do have the FXY 58 calls going, but I do think that the FXY 60 strike calls. For September 18th are really good. Yeah, I did have some mishaps with that portfolio. That's fine, you can go ahead. I'm not scamming anybody. It's fine. People can complain if they want. I don't hold any reservations against it. It's just incorrect though. Um, yes, I did only have a couple losses in the very first part of the year, and the last couple months have been a little difficult with these 0DTs, but I've never professed that I've been hitting every single trade, and anyone that does say that is a scammer. You know, I've definitely taken credit for my losses. I've had some massive losses. He's just trying to make me feel bad, which it won't work. Yeah, and it was a challenge for me. That's the whole point of it, is that it was a challenge. The the 5,000 portfolio. What's very likely is that that person probably is projecting a little bit in terms of they probably blew up their portfolio and blaming me for it, which I've had many people do that. It is what it is. But I'm not the one trading for you. You're the one pressing your own buttons. I can tell you a trade's good or not. It's completely up to you at that point to do your own due diligence. I don't give financial advice though. When you join my channel, you're watching me trade. I'm not telling you to take positions. I'm not telling you to do anything else. These are positions that I'm taking. If you don't like my trades, you don't have to like my trades. But there's nothing I'm professing or anything else. If I think a trade is good, I'm allowed to talk about it. So you're definitely incorrect about that. Feel free to report it. Oh, it's okay. I'm not concerned. I'm just stating what's true is that any of these trades are my trades. You don't have to like them, you don't have to take them. Again, I think he is projecting. He might say he's not, but very likely he is. Well, I understand there's some of those channels out there that do hype people up, that do say, oh, well, this is the next squeeze, this is the next trade, blah, 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 blah. Um, I think that we've established over literally hundreds of videos, hundreds of hours of streams, that that's not what we do here. We look at technical analysis, we go over trades that we do think are potentially going to work. If I think the trades are good, I take them. If they don't work, then they don't work. I do teach on the side, but I don't teach financial advice at all. I teach, how to trade. So far, just the shares. I haven't filled the options out yet. That's for Western Union. So we've had a couple different things that made the SPY run. I believe the Palantir earnings this morning were pretty good, which that of course is going to push some tech weight. But we also had over last weekend, we had um, let me step back. We originally had basically the United States and Israel were going to do a massive, massive attack on Iran. And during the weekend, of course, there was some talks made and they decided to postpone that. So because that, um, the market took that as really, really positive news. Now, the reason why I think the market's taking that as super positive news is because I do believe that a lot of traders are kind of tying what the FOMC is going to be doing with their monetary policy to what's happening in Iran. So if there basically is a pause in Iran, then that means that that kind of tosses the rate hike out of the window. If the conflict in Iran picks back up, then there's the possibility of that rate hike in September. So I think that's kind of what the market's really pricing around rather than the conflict itself. Oh, don't worry about it, Tom. It's not worth it. They just want to make me feel bad. And unfortunately, there's people out there that are like that. It's not the first time I've heard it. Won't be the last time I've heard it. Checking on, let's check what's going on with volatility. So our volatility's been kind of sitting around this 89 range. It did pull down to the 88.65 this morning. Did have the high of the 90.44, but it hasn't really moved a whole lot since then. The HIG has been pushing upward. Did push up to the 79.57. Currently at the 79.55. So we're not really seeing this slow down at all right now. Each time we start getting that head and shoulders, we see it right there. See it right there, and this is on the 1 minute time frame. It gets that breakout. Now we are also in the upper Bollinger, which on the daily time frame, usually there's a mechanic, which is the upper Bollinger mechanics, or Bollinger mechanics in general. Usually we'll see the day one secure that level, day two give us a higher high. So unless the earnings tonight are any bad, um, we should have that expectation that we should be seeing a higher high out of tomorrow. Let me check my paper. So the earnings today is AMD. Very, very big one. Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. And that's kind of, it does bother me when people come in and do that, because it's like, I don't really make any money from streaming on YouTube. I don't make any money from the Discord. I think I get between all the teaching and everything that I do, I think I get a little over $600 a month, which, you know, that helps, but that's not, paying my bills, right? Um, I put in hundreds, hundreds, and hundreds and hundreds of hours into this. Uh, on YouTube alone, I think there's over 17 days straight of content if you're to sit there and watch every single video straight. Um, I could be working at McDonald's and making more. Okay. So am I here to scam people? Well, I don't see where I'm getting the money from. So it's kind of, a duality is that they come in here, they see something like that. Yeah, it makes me feel bad. Um, but at the same time, there's zero bearing to it. I'm not some big YouTuber, I'm not some big channel, I'm not doing anything crazy. I've been trying to teach people for years and years and years and years and years before I even begin to put a basic charge on anything. So it's a little upsetting. Um, and I do feel like it kind of tramples on what the whole goal of this is which is to help people. So, well, let's check the top of this channel. Okay, the top of this buying channel, within the current session anyway, is anywhere from that 770, almost 772, up to that 773. So, if they really want to squeeze today, then that 772, 773 could be within the target. But I don't think that's the goal, um, because it's likely the target for tomorrow that they're going to try to push the top of that channel, where they try to aim between that 770 to, or 777, excuse me, to the 780. Now, one thing that you can see here though, look at the volume here, is that there basically is descending volume besides those few spikes. So, and especially just looking at the actual volume on the day, it isn't very high right now. So it definitely can keep running. Um, but as soon as buyers start pulling back a little bit, I do think that this can drop fairly high, or fairly low. Now that fairly low range might be pushing towards this 763, maybe 764, but I do expect the push under that call wall. Right, it's enough for the coffee. It pays for gas in the car, it pays a little bit, but it doesn't do a whole lot. I'm not surviving off 600 a month. So I don't know. That's a little upsetting to me in terms of that. Um, because I do work really hard to you know, teach and do the content that I do put out. So, mission accomplished, Brian. You did make me feel bad. I think the calls for tomorrow could be really, really good because just usually we do see the upper Bollinger, see that higher high, and this is very within the bounds to do so. I think a lot of people are expecting AMD to have a very good earnings. Very likely the case. AMD's up almost 8% right now. Volatility is picking up a little bit. Or no, it did pull down. Excuse me. Keep forgetting it was at 89. So it is at 88.85. Higgs still at the 79.55. I can delete that box. That wasn't a major accumulation. It was a little bit of an accumulation. Not a whole ton. We're starting to see a actually fairly large accumulation in here though. This range is basically giving us the same accumulation within the money value as this range up here is. which is, you know, basically a whole dollar above it. And let me go ahead and check the gamma, make sure that hasn't shifted. Because if not, then the thesis just still remains the same. Okay, so the call wall did move up to the 767, which means that our target basically becomes something like that. Buying calls this morning would have been super killer. Did have a little bit of a selling candle in there. But not really shifting the tide so far. Volatility still dropping. Pretty crazy buying today, even though the volume's low. If we don't see the push down fairly soon here, though, I will be cutting my 0DTE puts, even though they were very small positions. If we do hit the top of the channel today, I will take some put positions against that. And potentially on the 5-minute time frame, hitting the 20 MA could be a really nice call opportunity, but I just don't want to be buying into high IV calls right now. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna cut the puts here and wait to see if we push into the top of that channel. So Iran just came out and said that the talks so far have been assessed as positive at both the technical and political levels, and Iran is working with Oman to develop the necessary mechanisms for future arrangements to manage shipping traffic in this strategic waterway. Which means that still no agreement yet, but at least we're not gonna bomb each other. Yeah, it definitely sounds like more upside. That's definitely a positive type of catalyst. All right, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a day here. I'll be back on Thursday. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want me to look up before I head out? Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. I'm just kind of in a bad mood over earlier, but I'll get over it. But yeah, we'll take a look at more dated stuff tomorrow. See how these current plays work out and continue the push. So, um, I don't know if I said tomorrow. On Thursday. Thursday we will. So have a good day, everybody. Trade safe. I'd be super hesitant to continue trying to short into this. If we do push up to this top of this channel here, that changes things a little bit because again, we have seen some rejections from the top of this channel. Even this very big wick that other people say isn't on other brokerages and everything, but that wick still matters quite a bit. I know Webull likes to track a lot of dark print type pool or dark pool prints, excuse me if I could talk right. And it's very likely that was one of them. And the likelihood that that was one of them is because, we shot up right to that price. Um, so it's obviously somebody was buying something in there. So yeah, if we get to the top of that channel, that changes things a little bit, I would expect to pull away from that channel and start heading downward slightly. But again, my expectations moving into tomorrow is that we do see a higher high from this. So, gonna end it on that note. Thank you everybody for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. No, I won't be streaming tomorrow. I will be streaming Thursday, and I will be streaming Friday. So, um, no, Wednesdays are usually the days that I go spend my morning with my wife. Kind of the only time I get to, unless, she has time off on Saturday or something. So, okay, everybody. I'm terrible with goodbyes, but have a great day. Trade safe. Hopefully our dated stuff does well, and I will talk to you all on Thursday. So take care.